So just when you thought there couldn't possibly be any more room in the market for yet another variation of IPA, along comes Cold IPA. So in this video, I'm going to have a look at this supposedly new style and also take you through a recipe for my interpretation of it, or an IPL, and yeah, have a taste in the beer at the end. So stick around and let me know what your thoughts are on cold IPAs and if you've brewed any yourself. So before we get into my attempt at brewing this style, let's just get into the whole cold IPA versus IPL debacle that's out there at the minute. So first of all, before I say anything else, neither of these are really sort of properly codified styles in the sense that they haven't been guidelines written up on them for BJCP judging or anything like that. So really, they're open to interpretation and people can do with them what they want and name beers what they want. So at the end of the day, there's not much point having a big argument about it, but there is a lot of different information out there as to what constitutes an IPL or a cold IPA, and a lot of differing information, to be honest. So for me, I personally don't think there's really that much of a difference between the two, to the point that I'm not sure it's worth there being a new name for the style, as in cold IPA. But, you know, perhaps that's just a bit of marketing spin and people want to find a new name to sell these types of beers under. So I've included a couple of links in the description to articles that discuss this style, and the consensus seems to be that it was pioneered by a US brewery called Wayfinder back in 2018. Some of the content and quotes that we're going to talk about now are actually directly from the original brewer at Wayfinder and other commercial brewers that have picked up the style since. Now, what I struggle with is how these guys try to justify the distinction between a cold IPA and an IPL. Firstly, by essentially suggesting that the majority of IPLs are just an IPA recipe that's had lager yeast shoved into the mix. And also with a fairly heavy insinuation that they're just generally not particularly well brewed beers. Let me give you a couple of quotes to illustrate that, which are directly from the brewers of these cold IPAs. So IPLs can be a bit clunkier because they simply take an IPA recipe and substitute an ale yeast with a lager yeast. Usually the fermentation is hurried or it is mishandled because brewers that try this approach don't hang their hats on lager styles. They just do not stand out enough to gain any footing. Seems a little bit bitchy to me, I don't know about you. So I've seen personally quite a range of IPLs over in the UK, which are actually doing a really great job of blending kind of lager brewing techniques with IPA style hopping schedules. One that immediately springs to mind for me is Running with Scepters by Lost and Grounded Brewing, which is a really great beer and quite a long running kind of core beer for them, I think, because it is very good. The brewers in these articles then go on to try and explain how different cold IPAs are to IPLs by essentially describing what, to my mind, is a description of an IPL anyway. So let me give you some examples of that. In my mind, an IPL is like making an IPA into a lager, and that's not what this is. To me, it's taking a West Coast IPA and making it more West Coast by showcasing the hops and having a really crispy grain bill. Presumably one way to do that would be to be making it more like a lager, which is kind of what you've just said for what an IPL is. I don't know. They go on. What we ended up with is decisively unique from IPL or dry hopped lager. It has a magnificent hop aroma, clean assertive bitterness, and a bold, clean finish that makes the drinker crave another sip. Which to me sounds like a good description for an IPL or a hoppy lager. If you've got any other views on that, let me know in the comments. But it all sounds very, very samey to me anyway. So in terms of what they talk about as far as actual recipe and process goes, the grain bill basically should be very simple or straightforward, i.e. a lager grain bill, and will often include adjuncts like rice and or flaked maize. The original Wayfinder version was apparently fermented quite warm at about 65 Fahrenheit, which equates to 18 degrees C, which for me is also slightly baffling, because if that's the case, why call it a cold IPA? But from what I can see, that's not necessarily something that everyone that's brewing cold IPAs is doing. A lot of people are still using the kind of standard lagering temperatures and schedule. In addition to that, for this style, it seems that dry hopping towards the end of fermentation, i.e. active fermentation, dry hopping to encourage biotransformation, is something that should generally be done as part of this brewing method. Now, all of that is fine, and it sounds like good ideas to produce a good kind of lagery IPA, but you can't be telling me that over the sort of 10 plus years that IPLs have been on the scene, that people haven't been using those sorts of methods within various IPL recipes. Some may have, some may have not. There's a lot of variation within it. It's not an actual style, as we said at the beginning, but I just don't think there's anything new here as far as cold IPAs. I think this is just it's just a branding exercise, I've got to be honest. Anyway, enough ranting. Call it whatever you want. For me, the outcome creates a great showcase for hops and is actually a way of brewing IPAs that really appeals to me because of the way that it highlights the hop flavour and gives you a really nice crisp dry base for those to shine on top of. So let's get into the brewing and show you my interpretation of how to brew a cold IPA, or an IPL if you want to call it that. Let's go. So there we have it. That is the Cold IPA or IPL in the glass. It is absolutely Baltic in the garage today, so it seems like appropriate weather to be drinking something called a Cold IPA. It's got a nice, not transparent. There's a slight haze on it, but it is a lot clearer than you would get with certainly a lot of IPAs nowadays. And yeah, it's more reminiscent of clearer West Coast styles to me. Very light in colour, which you'd expect with that grain bill that we just went through. And yeah, it's holding a really good, like, tight, sort of fluffy white head on there. This glass is nucleated quite heavily, in fact, so I think that's helping just to keep the head sitting up on there, and you can see some really prominent sort of streaming carbonation coming up because of that. So yeah, let's give it a little tester. So on the nose, there's some really nice, sweet sort of floral notes coming off of this. Maybe that's emphasised a little bit by a little bit of kind of sweet malt aroma as well. But the malt is very much sitting back. I'm definitely getting that kind of Cascade, well, Simcoe and Cascade mainly because they're in the dry hop on this. But yeah, really nice floral, citrus, quite orange peel kind of based. Maybe a little bit of a peachy thing as well. Possibly some passion fruit. I do often get a kind of passion fruit note off of Simcoe. So yeah, the aroma is lovely. It's not blow your head off aromatic, but it's just a really nice, inviting aroma on the beer. And yeah, that's despite having a pretty hefty white cap of foam on the top. So tasting time, decent bit of bitterness up front, very nice, crisp finish on it. So it has got that kind of lager finish where it's just dry, crisp, but then the IPA kind of flavours coming in. Yeah, lots of grapefruit there. It's maybe a little bit less sweet and floral than what you get on the aroma. There's a bit more of that resiny pine flavour coming through. I think the Centennial and the Columbus are a bit more prominent on the flavour as you would expect. But some beautiful top notes there of, yeah, grapefruit, a little bit of passion fruit, nice citrus rind, kind of classic, yeah, sort of American IPA flavours really. But just super bright, very pleasing, extremely drinkable. It's not that low in ABV, so it did come out at 6% in the end, but dangerously quaffable. I think the dryness and the bitterness and the crisp finish really enhances that. So I'm well pleased with that. It's actually got a little bit of a vibe of those slightly more traditional kind of American pale ales at the higher strength, where there was a bit of a sort of crossover between the IPAs and the pale ales in terms of style, but just really nice drinkability. So yeah, I'm really pleased with that. I think that's worth having a go. If I was going to redo this, would I change much about it? I'd probably just play around with different hop combinations, to be honest. Perhaps go a little bit heavier on the dry hop, maybe the Whirlpool edition, just give it a little bit more oomph. But I don't think you want to go too far with that unless you're going to, you know, sort of lose some of that kind of clean, crisp, sort of lager-like finish. So I think it's relatively good balance as it is. As far as the grist goes, I think the use of rice in that rather than the flaked maize or corn is a good thing. So that helps to, again, give it that dryness, but not introduce the sort of flavour of maize or corn, which I was trying to avoid. So I'd definitely stick with that. I don't think you really need to go much higher than the percentages that I've used in here. I wouldn't want it kind of any drier than it already is, or maybe the body becoming any more reduced. The little dash of carapils, maybe that's helped a little bit with the head retention there. I don't know, but I definitely would stick with this without any of the darker kind of caramel or crystal malts in the grist as well, because I think too much sweetness in this would start to make it, again, lean a little bit more towards just tasting like a normal IPA. So yeah, let me know if you've got any questions. Call it a cold IPA, call it an IPL, whatever you like. I think these are a really good style of beer to try, and a nice twist on the kind of normal American IPAs that you can do. So cheers, everyone.
I'm the dude. So that's what you call me, you know? That or his dudeness or duder or, you know, El Duderino if you're not into the whole brevity thing.